Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Locke, welcoming you to this month's episode of Citizens Bulletin with our host, Ashley Klingon-Smith, who's the Pennsylvania State Director for Americans for Prosperity. Each month, Ashley brings timely reports about the work and efforts being done by AFP, which is one of the largest grassroots organizations in Pennsylvania and the United States. Hi, Ashley.
Good morning, Susan. Thanks so much for having us. We are thrilled to be here. I have a guest with us today. We have got a lot of ground to cover, and so we're looking forward to being here this beautiful month of October.
Well, thank you. We're delighted to have you here, too, and looking forward to what you have to share. Please go ahead.
Wonderful. Awesome. Yes, we will get started. So, Casey, you are on the line, right?
I am here.
Okay,
thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Yes, absolutely. So, friends who are listening, I just want to introduce our guest today. Casey Maddox is the Vice President for Legal and Judicial Strategy at Americans for Prosperity and the Senior Fellow for Free Speech at the Charles Koch Institute. In these roles, he advocates for a legal system that respects the rule of law and protects individual liberty. For over 15 years before joining CKI and AFP, Casey's legal career focused on defending the First Amendment rights of students, faculty, families, healthcare workers, and religious organizations, including before the Supreme Court. Immediately prior to joining CKI, he served as the director of the Center for Academic Freedom at the Alliance Defending Freedom. He has also testified 3 times before congressional committees. He has a JD from Boston College School of Law and a BA in Government and History from the University of Virginia. And as always, because we are ever more living on the World Wide Web these days, we encourage you to go ahead and find him and follow him on Twitter at Casey, Casey, Maddox, M as in Mary, ATTOX _ and see all of the great information and intelligence he is pushing out on a very regular basis on that platform. But Casey, it is awesome to have you. I know so many folks across Pennsylvania are taking time over the past few weeks and have taken time to contact their United States Senators, Pat Toomey and Bob Casey, who are going to have a say here very shortly on the vacancy and filling that currently exists on the Supreme Court. And so what I was going to do is give a brief timeline of Americans for Prosperity's engagement on this issue, and then do kind of a lightning round of questions with you, Casey, as our subject matter expert on all things judiciary, and then share, of course, several calls to action for the listeners, because as always, as a grassroots organization, our job is to scale your voice and make it as effective as it can be at the most influential junctures in time that we can. And so, obviously on September, I think it was September 20th, we all learned of the passing of Justice Ginsburg, and it was obviously a shock to so many. And on September 21st, we issued a statement on the vacancy left by Justice Ginsburg's passing. And in that statement, we called on the president to choose a strong constitutionalist to nominate to the court. That same day, I think, Casey, you had an op-ed published in the National Review entitled "The Supreme Court Needs a Justice Who Puts the Constitution First." And then just a few days later, we went to where we typically always go first, and that is the grassroots. So just a few days later, September 25th, we had a Facebook Live with Casey and our president, Tim Phillips, to talk about the vacancy and the implications of that, and the need for both the Senate and the president to do their constitutional duties. And then just a couple days later, we had President Trump announce his nominee, and in in Amy Coney Barrett. And we then issued our own statement in support of her and announced, what we were going to deem a full-scale campaign to confirm the judge. And so since that time, we have been full steam ahead. And so I am so excited to have Casey here to talk all about Amy Coney Barrett and kind of what this process is going to look like and what some of the things we're going to hear, how we can find, what is the truth in what we're hearing, and then how, most importantly, we can mobilize ourselves in kind of playing a role in this process. And what we mean by that, most certainly at this juncture, now that we have a nominee from President Trump, is really making our voices heard to both United States Senator Pat Toomey and Bob Casey. So Casey, can you give listeners, I just want to start here, some context of AFP's work in the judicial strategy space? When did we begin to engage? How has our impact looked kind of from your vantage point in relation to other kind of DC, Arlington-based organizations, being that we really have that comparative advantage of having such a broad state-based infrastructure across 35 state AFP chapters. So we'd just love to hear a little bit about that from you.
Sure. Well, so basically over the last 3 nominations, we have been engaged in encouraging people to providing the platform really for activists around the country to let their voice be heard with our members of the United States Senate who choose or decide whether to confirm nominees to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the reason we do that is because the court is so critical in our system. The government has become so out of whack in the way it works. Not only the fact that so many more decisions are made in Washington, D.C. instead of at your state house and in other places around the country where, much closer to the people who are actually affected by them. And that's not the way the system is supposed to work. And then in Washington, D.C. itself, you have our lawmakers are not making law anymore. They're largely passing the buck over to other agencies to make the law, to the executive branch and to the Supreme Court, and asking them to make law. And the place where we can really most affect that is at the Supreme Court, by having the Supreme Court be, playing the role it's supposed to play, which is to put the Constitution first, defend our freedoms, and not to legislate from the bench. Instead, to turn that responsibility back over to the legislature and tell them it's going to be their job and they're going to be held responsible for it. And so that's why we are engaged in this space, to try to have an outsized influence in making sure that the court is doing its job and that it's expecting the other parts of our government to do their job, and not going to tolerate other parts of the government not doing their job and violating our rights in the process. And so, if we get that right, if we can get the court doing its job, then I think we can have just an incredible amount of impact for our future in making sure that our government works properly.
Understood. So, yes, many of you will remember we worked on both confirmations of Brett Kavanaugh and also Justice Gorsuch. And so we are now engaged with Amy Coney Barrett, the nominee from President Trump. Can you talk with us a little bit about some of the, qualifications and qualities that are unique to Amy Coney Barrett? I think both from a jurist perspective and just an individual perspective, that has led AFP to make the endorsement and support of her during this process.
Absolutely. Well, you begin with what makes a good judge. And this is why we have, some of our initial statements on this before the president had made the selection of Judge Barrett were to signal what we thought was important and the kind of nominee that we hoped that he would choose. And it's essentially someone who is first and foremost qualified, but then also just demonstrates that they are independent-minded, focuses on the Constitution, puts the Constitution first in their decisions instead of reasoning back to the Constitution, to look at it first. And then will defend our freedoms is not going to shy away from telling other branches of government or the state or federal government when they violated our rights that they're not going to shy away from holding them responsible for that. But then understands that it's the job of the lawmakers to make law. That's a lot, but that's basically the role of, that's what we're looking at. And so, unfortunately, President Trump has put together his list of potential Supreme Court nominees. That makes the job a little bit easier. But we've poured through her record as a judge, her writings and public appearances, all the things that she said, and check that against what she's done. And what you come out with is a very clear picture that Judge Barrett is exactly the kind of justice that we should want on the court. And that's why our grassroots activists around the country have just been overwhelmingly supportive of her, and we expect to continue to be.
No, that's great. So we have her as the nominee from the president, and now we're seeing her making some Hill visits to different Senate offices, and we understand it's up to the Senate now to advise and consent, and they'll vote on whether or not they'll confirm her. We have this 24-hour news cycle, and sometimes things are really, you can sit and watch any given channel for an hour, and you come away from the TV like it's clear as mud, this process. So can you just talk a little bit? You do such a brilliant job of distilling down kind of to the basics of what the timeline here is, kind of what this process is going to look like. Can you share with listeners just a bit about what they can expect over the coming weeks?
Sure thing. So right now, she is going through a process where she's providing information to the Senate. She's provided some of that. They're going to ask her for more information, and she's going to provide that information. And it's kind of the sort of thing that's, where are your investments? And, what do you think are the 10 most important cases that you've decided? Those kinds of questions that they're asking her now. And then she's also having individual meetings with senators. Now, of course, all of this is in the context, which I think makes this an easier process, or should make it an easier process. She was confirmed to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals just 3 years ago. So 3 years ago, they were asking many of these exact same questions and getting answers from her that were satisfactory answers then to put her on the federal bench. And so I think that should make for an easier process. They have the documents, they have her responses to these questions, but they're going through that now and having these individual meetings with senators. The week of the 12th of October will be the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings. And so over about a 3 or 4 day process, the Senate Judiciary Committee members will ask her questions, and they'll get answers to those, and then they'll decide whether or not to report her out to the full floor of the Senate for the entire Senate to vote on her nomination. We expect that they will. And then the full Senate will take up her nomination by the end of October. We expect that last week of October that there will be a vote on her to confirm her to the Supreme Court. So that's basically the process we're going to see unfold over the next month. Understood.
And can you just remind us, what does the United States Constitution kind of dictate specifically about this process? Does she have to visit the offices of every U.S. senator? What are the things in this process that are enumerated in the Constitution?
Sure. It's a pretty simple process as it's actually laid out in the Constitution, right there in Philadelphia, right?
Yes, you got it.
It's a pretty simple process, and it basically just says that the president nominates, and the Senate will provide its advice and consent. And the way the Senate provides advice and consent is to vote on the nominee. The Senate has decided that it typically does that with through the hearing process and with providing all this information and all these things. But none of it is actually constitutionally required. The only thing that's required is for the Senate to let the president know that it has provided its consent. And once it does that, then the president provides the person with their commission to go serve on the Supreme Court. So wow. All of this is largely, a process that the Senate has set up for how it's going to manage these nominations.
Understood. Okay. So, Casey, we hear terms cited again on that 24-hour cycle that we're all now getting accustomed to on cable television, but we're constantly hearing terms like originalist, textualist, pragmatist, structuralist. Can you just talk about which of these apply to Amy Coney Barrett's philosophy, and what those that apply, what those mean, and why they are important? And most critically, when folks are scaling their voice to Senator Casey and Senator Toomey, why talking about, one or two of these terms is actually quite important?
Sure. So the way she describes her own philosophy, she describes herself as similar in philosophy to Justice Scalia. The way we talk about this very similarly is to say that we are looking for a constitutionalist. And I think different people describe it in different ways. Essentially what that means is that you interpret the Constitution and the laws in an originalist way, which is to say you look at the Constitution and try to understand what do those words mean at the time that they were written. If we need them to have a different meaning than the way that they were written and understood when the people decided to make that the fundamental law, then there's a process for amending the Constitution. But you interpret the Constitution as it was written, and that means you firmly protect the civil liberties that are protected in the Constitution, but you also tell the government that it's responsible for making laws, that the Congress is responsible for making laws, for example. And when you're interpreting statutes, you interpret them as the legislature wrote them. You don't do the job of the legislature for them. It's your responsibility to interpret and apply them, the plain meaning of the laws that the legislature chose. And so that puts the burden on them. If they make policy choices that the people don't like, they can't blame anyone but themselves. And the people have the opportunity to hold the legislature accountable for that instead of passing the buck to someone else. So that's how she sort of describes her philosophy. And it's, frankly, I think exactly the kind of view that will, provides the right position for the Supreme Court in defending our civil liberties and making sure that we can hold government accountable.
That is so wonderfully said, Casey. Thank you so much for that. The court and the judiciary is one of three separate but equal branches of our government. I know, I suppose I would argue that it tends to get the least amount of attention of the executive and the legislative. But right now, it is elevated and folks are talking about this, and that is a good thing. I think folks, antennas are up just politically and civically, and we always, find great value in meeting folks where they are, and we are excited that Americans are excited about this process. So can you just share with us as kind of a final thought here, why is this vacancy so critical to fill and have a complete bench of 9 members on the court?
Well, I think it's so critically important because this is something that's going to impact us for decades to come. Supreme Court nominations, Supreme Court, being on the Supreme Court is a lifetime appointment. And Judge Barrett at 49 has a very good chance to be on the Supreme Court for decades into the future. So it will have a lot of impacts. It has, potentially generational and even more than generational impact if you think about the decisions that will be rendered by the court and how that will impact even the years that come after. So it's critically important. And frankly, that's why we are seeing, our grassroots activists were incredibly enthusiastic and were a significant part of the process in both the Gorsuch and Kavanaugh nominations. We have seen as many contacts to senators, over 200,000 in the last 5 days. And by comparison, that's about how many we had in the entire 3-month process supporting Justice Kavanaugh.
Wow,
so
that's unbelievable.
It's just an overwhelming amount of grassroots support for Judge Barrett. And I think it speaks to how much people connect with her, but also how much people understand why the court is so important and why it's this has more potentially more impact than any individual race because of the lifetime nature of a Supreme Court, and also because of the court's responsibility for making sure that all the other branches do their job and not more, and protect our rights. So it's just crucially important. That's, we have a website set up at uniteforbarrett.com that I would encourage people to go to. It takes 30 seconds to make sure that your senators hear from you and know that you want Judge Barrett confirmed.
Absolutely. Casey said it first, uniteforbarrett.com. We encourage all of you to go there, share that. It will have a letter that after you sign, as Casey said, we can do it under 30 seconds. It will go straight to the inboxes of Senator Toomey and Senator Casey. It is so critical that they continue to hear from you, a steady beat and a loud beat between now and the end of October. We've talked about Judge Amy Coney Barrett, her education, her high-profile clerkships, just the fact that she is such a well-respected law professor at 3 different esteemed institutions. And, during her nomination to the Seventh Circuit just a few years ago, all 49 full-time Notre Dame Law School faculty endorsed her. 500 Notre Dame Law School alumni endorsed her, and every Supreme Court law clerk in the October term of 1998 endorsed her. That is an incredible repertoire of individuals, and so we are excited to join them this time in her pursuit of being confirmed to the Supreme Court. The other thing I just want to remind folks of is to go ahead and follow us on Twitter. That's at AFP Pennsylvania, and of course you can find us on Facebook by simply searching for our page. And you can do that by searching at PAAFP. But the other great thing that we have created on Facebook is a group. And so if you simply search Confirm Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, you will be directed to our group. It is hosted by Americans for Prosperity. And we have a growing community, I think now of literally thousands, who are just sharing why they are supporting her. We're putting out different actions, different thoughts of what you can do over the coming weeks. And it would just be so powerful to have a great group of folks from Southeast PA on this, being that our own Constitution was birthed in your area, and so and in your city. And so we are excited about this. We also encourage you to use the hashtag #ConfirmAmy. We are doing it regularly and often, and would encourage you all to do so as well. Again, that Facebook group is Confirm Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. And also you can find that site that will direct you to the letter that will go to Toomey and Casey at uniteforbarrett.com. Casey, I of course want to give you the final word. Our team is working every day to get dozens of signatures into both of our Senate offices. But can you just share with listeners one more time why it is so important for senators to continue to hear from us over the coming weeks? We've had this groundswell of activity into offices, but why is it important to keep that beat going?
We just can't take this for granted. I know that a lot of folks will look at the situation and think, well, there's a president and a Senate of the same party, so surely this is it's probably a done deal. And the reality is, if you watched the Kavanaugh process, if you watched, even with Justice Gorsuch, there will be an immense amount of pressure. There already are a number of organizations that are on the other side of this who are strongly advocating against Judge Barrett. And I think that just speaks to why we need to make sure that, voices like yours are heard, people who want her confirmed, who can let their senators know that, because frankly, there won't be a whole lot of time for persuading senators at the end here. This is going to be a pretty tight time frame to get this done. And the senators need to know going into this process that their constituents want this done and that this is a high priority thing for them. So if that's you, I would encourage you to go to the website and let them know, because we need to make sure that they have spines of steel as they go into this process.
Casey, Pennsylvanians, thank you so much for joining us today. And we just appreciate everything you're doing. If there's anything that we can do in addition, as always, you know where to find me. But Susan, it's been such a pleasure. Our time always goes so quickly. And I know we packed a lot in here, but prayerfully it is going to be helpful to listeners in their journeys of contacting Senator Toomey and Senator Casey.
This was a marvelous Citizens Bulletin report. Ashley and Casey, thank you so much for this very pertinent and timely information. We all appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you're doing. And listeners, we hope you'll join us again next month for another Citizens Bulletin.